Notice is hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey, at 8 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, December 13th, 2011, in the boardroom of the Administration Building, 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the Board and to transact any other business to come properly before the Board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Friday, December 9th, 2011, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education, located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, Town Clerk of Westfield, the Alternative Press, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of the meeting. Mr. Yaniro, could we have a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Matesic?
Here.
Mr. Finn?
Here.
Ms. Carey?
Here.
Mrs. Clancy?
Here.
Mr. Friedman?
Here.
Ms. Kerstad?
Here.
Mrs. Lights?
Here.
Mr. Slater?
Here. Jenny, could you lead us in the flag salute?
Happy to.
Thank you.
Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, announcements. Mark, anything on your end?
Yes, sir. Congratulations to the Westfield High School gymnastics coach, Melissa Greenwald, who was named Star Ledger Coach of the Year. Also, at the next board meeting on January 10th, we will be honoring the boys' cross-country team.
All right. That's it. Yeah.
Westfield senior citizens are once again invited to the final rehearsal of the Westfield High School's Winter Choral Concert. The rehearsal will take place in the school's auditorium from 10:45 to 11:30 a.m. on Wednesday, December 21st. For more information, contact the School Community Relations Office at 789-4463.
Thank you. All right, Mitch?
Congratulations to the Westfield High School students who were accepted in the 2012 Region 2 Mixed and Women's Choruses. 7 high school students were accepted into the choirs out of hundreds that auditioned. The students will attend rehearsals the month of January and perform with other students from Central New Jersey on January 29th, 2012 at Monroe Township High School. The selected students for mixed chorus include Mary Barber, Elizabeth Griesmer, Michael Kirkland, Matt Lynn, and Jeffrey Coe, and those students chosen in the women's chorus include Megan Pinna and Melanie Snyder. Congratulations.
Kindergarten registration. We are ready to welcome our class of 2025.
Wow.
Hard to believe. The district will be registering children who will become eligible for kindergarten in the 2012-2013 school year. We are also interested in locating children who have not attended the Westfield Public Schools for kindergarten but will enter first grade in the fall. Please check the Lincoln School website for information regarding kindergarten registration, including available times for day or evening appointments. Registration information for first grade is available on each of our elementary school websites. All new registrants must bring required forms and documents as outlined on the websites. We look forward to welcoming our new students and families to the Westfield Public Schools.
Jenny, anything? All right, then the next Board of Ed meeting will be January 10th, 2012. We wish everyone in the Westfield community a happy holiday season and a healthy new year. With that, let's recognize the public for agenda items only. All right, seeing no one come to the podium, let's go to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Well, those people who follow our Board of Education meetings have heard about the Code of Conduct, actually starting in the summer, I would say, and then certainly throughout the fall. We've mentioned it a few times. The board had committed to the point that we were going to, as a district, review and revise our Code of Conduct, and that we would be including input from community members. And we had a wonderful community committee, actually. And just to go over briefly, we have 2 slides that list the people who were nice enough to volunteer their time, their effort, their thoughts to be on the Code of Conduct Committee. And these people, I won't name each one individually, their names are on the 2 slides, but they represent parents, they represent our business community, they represent law enforcement, health, they represent teachers, administrators, and we had 2 students on the committee as well. It was a committee where everyone came with their own perspectives, everyone was thoughtful, everyone took the process very seriously, and the document which we've come up with because of their input is very different from what we started with. In addition to the people whose names are listed on these slides, we also had input from other members of the community who would send codes of conduct from other districts or other schools that they were aware of, and all of this was really very helpful as we worked to come up with a document that would work for our specific district. As we worked through, we decided that we needed to focus the Code of Conduct on the same statement that we focus all of our efforts on, and that's our mission statement for the district. The mission statement was not developed by a small group. It's been developed over a decade by a series of community groups who have worked on strategic plans in this district. And so we start the Code of Conduct focusing on our mission statement, which is the Westfield Public School District, in cooperation with family and community, prepares all students to reach their highest potential and to become productive, well-balanced, and responsible citizens in a global society through educational programs that respect individual differences and diversity. So starting with that, and also starting with some of the beliefs from our strategic plan, we started talking about that there really have to be core ethical values. And the ethical values that were discussed quite a bit and decided upon are integrity and honesty, which manifests itself in so many ways, work ethic, and also sportsmanship. The core ethical values that we believe are the basic support for the rest of the Code of Conduct. We then talked about, if you think about what we said in our mission statement, our mission statement definitely talks about a community involving parents and everyone in the school community. So as our committee focused, we decided that, yes, certainly the focus is on students and what responsibilities students have and what rights students have, but it's not just that, because everybody in the school community has rights and responsibilities. And so in the Code of Conduct, we outline some responsibilities and rights that everyone shares. But then certainly some things are specific for students, some are specific for parents, some teachers, some administrators, some for me, and some for the Board of Education. And those are spelled out in the document as well. Also spelled out in the Code of Conduct, the state suggests that you include a guide for health and social services. We list the expectations. Sometimes people don't meet expectations and they need various types of support. Sometimes that support comes from the schools and structures we have in the schools. But sometimes students and families need outside support. And so there is a listing of health and social services that are available to people who live in Westfield. Similarly, sometimes legal services are a support that's required, and the state suggests we include that in our Code of Conduct. So there's also a listing for that. And the other piece that we thought was very important was to have a summary of infractions and also interventions. It was very interesting when we discussed this. Our student representatives, I think, were the first ones to bring this up. They said, you know, it's great to have a Code of Conduct. And in this case, if you include all the appendices, it's a 10-page Code of Conduct. But the students were very honest, and they said, it's not all that likely that students are going to read through 10 pages of a Code of Conduct. I mean, some might, that's certainly true, but in general, maybe not. And then some parents at the table volunteered, well, it may not be all that likely that most parents are going to read through 10 pages of a Code of Conduct. And the suggestion was made by the students on the committee, what we need is one-page summary. We can all go back and reference the other pages of the Code of Conduct, but we need a one-page summary that we can look at, and we have a sense of really what are the expectations and what will happen if we don't meet these expectations. Now this part, so it's a one-page chart. You would think, how long could it take to develop such a chart? You'd be surprised. Because it's hard to do. How do you make it clear to everyone? And yet, I think parents know this as well as educators. Every situation is a little bit different. I mean, if your child does something at age 6 and does something similar at age 13, you know what? You're going to probably make a different judgment. If there are extenuating circumstances, you have to make judgments. And yet, you have to be fair. If you're a parent, you have to be fair to all 3 of your children. And if you're a principal, you have to be fair to everybody in that building. So the chart we came up with lists the broad categories of behavioral expectations, and then gives a range of severity that those that can follow from those behaviors, and it gives the administrators and the parents guidelines as to what some of the either consequences or interventions can be for those areas. So it provides structure, but it also allows judgment to be in there. And again, there's a chart one chart for intermediate and high school, and then the elementary schools felt as though they needed a separate chart because it's just very different with the younger students. But those 2 charts really had input from all segments of this community, and those charts were redone quite a few times in order to make it something that everybody could reference easily. So everyone in the audience, everyone on the board has a copy of the Code of Conduct, both the regulation, which is the code itself, and the policy, which are the requirements from the state, basically. We've also pulled out the ethics as a separate item to be voted on in policy. It's also contained in the regulation. This is also on our website, so anybody who's watching this can view this. Tonight will be the first reading of this document, and the second reading will be in January. And once it has been fully adopted after the second reading, then we will disseminate this to all of the families in Westfield. But anyone who's interested in reviewing it at this point, it is on the website. Before I open it up to questions from the board or comments from the board, I want to thank everybody in the community who did participate in creating this document, the Code of Conduct. I think we have a valuable document that really does speak to our community. It's not a generic Code of Conduct, it's Westfield Code of Conduct. So I want to thank everyone who participated in that.
All right. Questions from the board? Start over here. Anyone? Over here, Roseanne?
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Comment? Questions
That
and comments?
this, the infractions and interventions chart, as well as the whole code of conduct, is revised and relooked at yearly, on a yearly basis, not only by the board, but through with all representatives of the community as well.
I just have a question. On the level of intervention, I'm just curious in the meetings that went on, how there's certain things that are 4 5s and certain things that are 5s, and I just wonder how you differentiate. I mean, I see a couple that, to me, oh my God, that's a 5, but it's a 4 5, and obviously there was a lot of discussion, and I'm just wondering how you can anyone that was at those sessions to sort of fill me in on how those were discussed.
There was a lot of discussion, and a number of those were specifically with administrators who deal with those issues on a daily basis, and so have a basis from which to speak. So I don't know if there's a specific one I could try to speak to, but I mean there definitely are levels. One here talks about theft, for example.
Right.
Any theft is wrong, any theft is serious, but there really are different levels of that. And it would also depend on the age of the student. Is there a history with the student? Is this a second offense? What was it? And how it was done? Was the student honest when it was discovered? There are a lot of steps that would determine whether it's a 4 or a 5.
Okay.
And as one example.
All right. That's thank you.
Mark?
Dr. Dolan, you made a comment about disseminating, once we're all done, disseminating it to the the children of Westfield and parents. What was I forget how we decided to disseminate it to the various different levels. The way we might do it to the high school would be very different than perhaps what we were going to do in elementary school. Can you talk about that?
Right. Right, at the high school and the intermediate level, I mean, the students are capable of certainly understanding the chart on their own. The elementary is a little bit different, though. Actually, we had a lot of discussion with the elementary principals who were concerned that, they have students as young as 5 or 6. So you're not going to hand them a chart like this, how it has to be explained to them and brought down to their level. And most people know in our elementary schools, we really do try to distill the basics of behavior, and we may use different vocabulary. So I don't think we're going to be handing out the charts to the parents of the elementary students, but it will be explained to the students by the teachers and the school differently than it will be at the intermediate and high school level.
Thanks.
Gee,
Dr. Dolan, on page 6 of 10 in the regulation,
Right?
I think it's the final note. The final category or topic called review of code of conduct.
Yes.
And this, to Roseanne's point, states that the code of conduct will be reviewed annually with input from the community. I thought when we were in policy, we had struck the second and third sentence, which was a definition of members of a committee. I have a copy that has that crossed out.
So that it would just have been, I'm sorry.
So it would just be the first sentence, which is what I thought had come out when we reviewed it in committee.
Oh. I don't have those notes in front of me. You certainly might
I
be
don't know
right.
if anybody else remembers.
I wasn't, you were my.
I was there for you. You were late. I was there for you too. Well, I wasn't alone.
Well, I was there. I don't happen to have my
Yeah,
notes here.
I was there.
Well, we could
I was
certainly.
there for sure.
Maybe we could just take another
look at it.
look at that. It defines a committee, but we don't really reference that committee because what the board is charged to do is annually review this code of conduct
Oh, I see.
with some input, but it doesn't require a committee of input. And I don't know that I think it's up to us to determine how that input is collected.
Oh, I see.
I get it.
You're right. We did have that discussion. I apologize. I did not remember it.
So I'd like you to consider whether or not those final 2 sentences are appropriate there.
I don't see them as appropriate as they refer to the committee, but it might be good to include some of the indicators like parents, guardians, students, that define what the community would mean. But I don't think that's totally necessary because I think that's described previously in the regulation.
so if you deleted the sentences, it would leave you the flexibility to add any or all of them
Right.
in a year's time.
Exactly.
If you left the sentence, it would require it. So perhaps it makes sense to delete the sentences,
Yeah.
knowing that the committee is not going to give this the short
Right.
shift. And,
Right.
right?
Right, so then when we get to policies and this is moved, we can move it with that change.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I had a question just on the page, it's the last couple of pages, 9 and 10, and that is the introduction to the charts, talks about discretion and consequences. And as it's worded, as was distributed, it leaves the discretion to the various principals. So much so to the extent that you could, at least as it's written, ignore the chart, which I don't think was the intent. So I just wanted to clarify that in fact wasn't the intent.
Right, it's not. It's why we gave them ranges. They can make judgments within that, but not to disregard the charts.
So if they were going to, so they couldn't do something off the chart, or they could, and then there'd be a process for it?
Well, it now does say with the prior approval of the superintendent,
Okay.
they may use, excuse me, they may use discretion. So if there is something, I think that'd be highly unlikely, honestly, but it could happen.
That's perfect. So then it gives them the flexibility, but there's a regulator on it, which is you.
Right.
And, okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I think that's a really good change, or an addition, so that we can ensure that there's consistency of application across the district.
So to that point, Dr. Dolan, how will you be assured of the consistency of the application of these disciplines or consequences? Will there be some periodic meetings, in addition to the school, in addition to the bullying school safety groups, safety committees?
Safety teams, right.
Safety teams that have to meet. How will you stay apprised of the consequences that are being meted out? Because they won't necessarily be part of a bullying
Right, they wouldn't.
conversation, or they may not come under that investigative process.
Right. I will tell you that certainly when we are at the higher levels, where there are more severe interventions, on a daily basis, I'm notified by our administrators about those. Every time a parent has to be called because a student doesn't follow the rule of the school, I'm not called for those. And I don't think I will be in the future, to be honest with you. But for any of the serious infractions, all of the principals know, they all reach out immediately. Most often, when they're in the process of finding out the story, I'm contacted right away. And that will continue to be the case. That's one way. And then also for all suspensions, I always not only get a verbal notice of that, I also get a written notice, a copy of what is sent to the parents outlining what the suspension is, for example, what it's for. So those are always followed to make sure that we are being consistent across the district. One other way we work to ensure consistency on a regular basis, not every meeting I have with administrators, but on a regular basis we go over certain things regarding certain types of discipline. For example, when it started to be where there was problems with people using internet on weekends and that was spilling over into the schools, that was a topic we brought in an attorney at least once, if not twice, I think we brought them in to talk about that and how we were all going to deal with that. So on a regular basis, we look to see what are new patterns. We had a meeting last year when we had concerns there was vandalism in the district and some vandalism in the school. That was one of our topics to talk about also. So we do look for trends and try to make sure we monitor them and that we're all doing the same thing.
Good.
Anyone else? Anything else? All right. We move to the minutes. I'd ask that the board approve the minutes of the board meeting held on November 29th, 2011, December 6th, 2011, and the private minutes of November 29th, 2011, and December 6th, 2011. Could I have a second? Any comments?
It's just, if Mr. Yaniro could point out what was revised in December 6th, I didn't pick it up. I
Yeah,
must have
we
missed it.
did, we did make a couple corrections of, I believe that was distributed. We have a copy of that in terms of, I believe,
It was just name changes mostly?
it was name changes, right.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, personnel. Jane?
Okay, I would like to ask for the board's approval of personnel items number 1 through 14.
Second.
I just wanted to note on item number 5 that the appointment for replacing a teacher is from Washington School. Just to have that there. And also item number 13, we continue to thank volunteers for our coaching positions for the winter, spring sports. We have several listed there as well.
And also on number 5, that should read, second sentence, effective January 3rd, 2012.
Ah. I was just getting to that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Stole your thunder.
Comments, questions? Vince?
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes.
Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mr. Matesic?
Yes.
Mr. Finn?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman?
Yes.
Ms. Kerstad?
Yes.
Mrs. Lights?
Yes.
Mr. Slater?
Yes.
All right. Facilities. Jane?
I do have a facilities report. Facilities met last Thursday. Jenny Lights sat in for Dave Finn. Thank you, Jenny, for joining us that evening. We first met with the representatives from Tamaqua School regarding the outdoor classroom that the PTO is working on developing. They have successfully completed phase 1 of the project, which was clearing out of the second grade garden, which is to the left of the driveway when you drive through the horseshoe of Tamaqua, and they built up additional garden beds in that area. So now the area can be utilized by additional classes. As you'll recall, Tamaqua was awarded an agricultural grant, and the materials from this grant is what helped to complete the project. We were shown plans for phase 2 of the project, which will be located in front of the building. So if you're facing Tamaqua, it will be to the left of the school, which is next to the first and second grade doors. Their plan is to create a structure that would promote an aesthetically pleasing outdoor learning environment. It would consist of 2 or 4 concrete pillars with seating around the perimeter of the structure and a hard surface in the center. It would be handicap accessible and be made available to all students. The principal and teachers are very enthusiastic about this project and hoping that Tamaqua could become a, to quote Mr. Cullen, lighthouse school for environmental education, which we just love. We just think that would be fantastic. We hope to have the committee join us at the full board at a meeting in January once we have more details and give everyone a full presentation. We also want to note that I want to note that Tamaqua will be celebrating its 50th anniversary next September, so I'm sure that there are additional exciting plans in the works as well. Facilities was then provided with a draft of a 5-year facilities plan by Vince Yanero and Mike Morris. They have both taken quite a bit of time to assess our buildings and begin working on a plan that will be a guideline for projects that they hope to have accomplished over the next several years. Some of the priority items have already been in the works for 2011-2012. You'll note the boilers at McKinley and Franklin, the boys and girls bathrooms, in the gym hallway in Edison, the addition of lockers at the high school, and a most recent addition that we have not discussed yet, but the repair of the stage rigging at the high school. This last item was brought to the attention of Mike Morris, who assessed the rigging and determined there is an immediate need to replace the ropes. And as you recall, the high school auditorium has undergone renovations so far to sound, lighting, seating, and new curtains for the stage. Did I get all the pieces to that? It's been done in incremental steps, and I think that's most of the pieces. So now that's the next step that needs to be tackled. We discussed the various ways that these projects could be funded, either through the capital improvements budget, or possibly some of the high school work could go through the excess funds from the bond. And we also had a bit of a discussion whether we would need to build additional dollars into the budget as well going forward. So I'm sure this discussion will carry over to the Finance Committee as well. This was a preliminary list, and we are still waiting to hear about the cost of the wireless network and a full assessment of our roofs. So we will be meeting again in January, and once we're ready, we will present the plan to the full board. The Facilities Committee just also wanted to thank Vince and Mike for dedicating their time to this plan. Our primary goal is to ensure that we are providing our students with a safe and structurally sound learning environment. That's always our top priority in facilities. And that's it.
All right, great report. Questions on that? Comments? Thank you. Jenny, long-range planning.
Long-range planning will meet this Thursday, December 15th at 7:30. I will be getting you an agenda and some background material so that we can review a proposal for a demographic report.
All right. So at this point, I'd just like to jump into what might technically be new business for 1 second, but it's relevant to the next agenda item, policies. I want to make just a couple of changes on the current constitution of committees, and that has to do with the fact that Julia is no longer on the board, so obviously there were changes required on the committee formations. So I would make those as follows, and noting there's still a lot of work to do looking at how the committees are, and we'll talk about that in future board meetings. But for tonight, I wanted to note with respect to policies, which is the next item on the agenda, I'd like Roseanne to chair that committee. I've talked to her about that, and she is anxious to get going as the chair on that committee, and we thank you for all the work you've done so far. It's been phenomenal. Jane will be a member of that committee. Mark and Dave will continue on that committee, and we'll see how that pans out going forward. With respect to, while we're talking about new committees or changes to committees, Mark, I'd like to note that you'll be on the Finance Committee going forward. Julia was on that committee, so it'd be a welcome addition.
Yep, thank you.
And then finally, one change that I think will benefit the board and the district, we'd like to form a legislation committee, and we'd ask that Ann chair that committee. She's taken the active role with respect to ad hoc legislation, and joining her would be Ginny, Roseanne, and Dave, with the alternate Jane. And we would ask them to talk about or think about, perhaps prior to the next meeting, exactly what it is that committee would hope to accomplish, and what its mandate would be. So we all know that Westfield is a wonderful district. We have a voice. We'd like to use that voice. We've done it well over time. We'd just like to make sure that we do it in a more coherent manner and really marshal up the resources we have and make sure that this board is apprised of all legislative matters pending and really speak as one voice. And I think Ann and the members of that committee can do that well. So thank you for doing that. With that, I'm going to go back into the policy portion of the meeting, and I would ask that, Roseanne?
I would ask the board to approve our core ethical values. We have to approve those separately, as Dr. Dolan mentioned in our superintendent report.
Oh, second.
All right. Do you want to take these separately?
I think we have to take them separately because we have to approve the core values, and then the other ones are first readings.
Right.
You're the chairwoman.
Okay. So are there any questions or discussion?
Ms. Kerstad?
Yes.
Mrs. Lights?
Yes.
Mr. Matesic?
Yes.
Mr. Finn?
Yes.
Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman?
Yes.
Mr. Slater?
Yes.
And now I ask the board to approve for first reading policy 5500 and the regulation 5500 with the change in the regulation as noted earlier in the discussion on page 6 of the deletion of the last two sentences.
I'll second.
Discussion, comments, questions? We had a good discussion earlier. Vince?
Ms. Kerstad?
Yes.
Mr. Finn?
Yes.
Mr. Matesic?
Yes.
Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman?
Yes.
Mrs. Lights?
Yes.
Mr. Slater?
Yes.
And then I'd like to ask the board to approve the Uniform State Memorandum of Agreement between education and law enforcement officials.
Second.
Any discussion?
Comments, questions? Vince?
Ms. Kerstad?
Yes.
Mrs. Lights?
Yes.
Mr. Matesic?
Yes.
Mr. Finn?
Yes.
Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman?
Yes.
Mr. Slater?
Yes.
And lastly, which was not on the agenda, but as an addendum, I'd like to Move that the board affirm the superintendent's decision on HIB incidences 12F03, 12L01, 12M08, 12T01, 12E10, 12E11, 12R5, 12HS09, 12HS10, for the reasons set forth therein.
Second.
Comments, questions? Vince?
Ms. Kerstad?
Yes.
Mr. Slater?
Yes.
Mr. Matestik?
Yes.
Mr. Finn?
Yes.
Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman?
Yes.
Mrs. Lights?
Yes.
That's all for policy.
All right, thank you. Curriculum, instruction, and programs.
Okay. I would ask the board to approve the nursing plan set forth here, and just note that a certified school nurse is assigned to every school during those hours when school is in session, according to the statute, and these are the schools and the names of the nurses.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Comments, questions? Vince?
Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mr. Finn?
Yes.
Mr. Matestik?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman?
Yes.
Ms. Kerstad?
Yes.
Mrs. Lights?
Yes.
Mr. Slater?
Yes.
All right, finance. I'd ask the board to consider finance resolutions 1 through 4. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Peg to talk about item number 1 and just describe the CUSAC and the statement of assurance.
CUSAC happens to be the current acronym from the state for the State System of Monitoring Public Schools. And we actually underwent our full state monitoring just last year in 2010, and that was reported at these meetings. But there is now a process where every year, every district has to review and approve a statement of assurance. It's not as in-depth as the state monitoring, but we have to go through the process. The items underneath CUSAP include instruction, fiscal management, governance, personnel, and operations. So for all of the items that were listed, the central staff reviewed every single one, made sure that we had the documentation necessary, made sure everything had been approved, verified some items with the State Department, and we are in compliance with all of the required items, and so I'm asking the board for approval for that statement of assurance for this year.
All right, thank you. Comments, questions?
I have questions about number 2.
Sure.
So, Vince, I guess these questions are for you around the FSA administrator.
Right.
So I understand that the provider that we've been using for the administrators has basically pulled out of the market.
Correct.
And we had to hire what is here Discovery Benefits.
Correct.
And I just wanted to get a little bit more from you, because I know you sent us a memo in the packet, but
Right.
compressing the time frame to hire a vendor, obviously there's reasons we have to do that, keeping with state law that we have to offer
Right.
that to our employees
Right, right.
when they're mandatory contributions. Did we get pricing from anyone else?
Th-
How
This,
did that process
yes,
work? Okay.
G.R. Murray, our health benefits broker, did get prices, did get quotes, has had considerable experience with this particular company.
Okay, so they came
And feels
recommended.
very good about them. Yes, they came out the lowest.
Okay, that's good, good to know that we had professional help. And then the second part of that, and I understand from the memo that's going out to staff, it speaks to a health savings account as opposed to flexible spending account. And there's certain advantages to having health savings account in terms of not having to, you don't lose your contributions. With a flexible spending account, you would lose them with a grace period.
This is a
That's what I'm
flexible
saying, so
spending.
why didn't we offer, is there a reason we couldn't offer an HSA? Is it-
This is in accordance with the law. The
Okay,
law
so-
requires an FSA.
So we cannot, by law, offer an HSA? where
Correct.
They have kind of taxed it up. Okay.
Correct, right.
I had a feeling, but I just wanted to make sure of
Right,
that.
right.
Okay, thank you.
And I might comment too, our attorney has reviewed and is okay with it, so therefore we can eliminate that sentence. It's pending successful attorney review. And I would add the word eligible before employees.
Okay.
Eligible before what?
Oh, here.
Before the word employees. Not every employee is eligible, but it's just
Okay.
employees who currently have health benefits coverage.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions on the finance motions?
Mr. Matesic?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman?
Yes.
Mr. Finn?
Yes.
Ms. Carey?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes.
Ms. Kerstad?
Yes.
Mrs. Lights?
Yes.
Mr. Slade?
Yes.
I'd ask the board to note the notes for the record. Which brings us to legislation.
I want to first thank Rich for forming this committee. I think that the spring is going to be a very busy season down in Trenton. And I think that they're going to be passing a lot of legislation that is really going to affect us here in Westfield, as in every district. So I think it's an important time for the board to have a committee really seeing what's going on in Trenton. And tonight, I would like to start by giving the board an update on 3 pieces of legislation. The first regarding school board elections, the second regarding tenure reform, and the third regarding the Opportunity Scholarship Act. Ginny and I attended the Garden State Coalition Board meeting last Wednesday, and this information is from that meeting and also from subsequent conversations with representatives from New Jersey school boards. Regarding the timing of school board elections, last month, legislation was introduced to allow communities to move the school board election to November while eliminating the annual vote on the budget. According to the bill, there are a number of ways a community can move the election from April to November. The first one, the school board can adopt a resolution. The second one, the municipal governing body, in our case the town council, can pass a resolution. Or thirdly, the question could be placed on the ballot by a petition signed by at least 15% of the voters who participated in the previous general election for members of the General Assembly. I'm pretty sure that one's not going to happen. The referendum to change the school board member election can take place in November, April, or any of the 4 special school election dates, which are January, March, September, or December. If the school election was moved to November, board members would take office at the beginning of January. And according to school boards, Senator Sweeney has said that this piece of legislation will be voted on during the current lame-duck session. So that will happen before January 10th. Regarding other education legislation, according to Lynn Strickland, who is the executive director of Garden States, and the school board legislative team, it is highly unlikely that any bills will move during the said lame duck session. But as soon as the legislature reconvenes, there are 2 bills that will probably be considered in short order. The first is the tenure reform bill that was introduced by Senator Teresa Ruiz, the chair of the Senate Education Committee. And this is called the Teacher Effectiveness and Accountability for the Children of New Jersey Act, or shorthand TEACH-NJ. Some of the provisions of the bill are as follows. Teachers would be granted tenure after 4 years of teaching instead of 3 years, which is currently the system. Seniority would be phased out, and school improvement teams would be created and empowered to make hiring decisions without the approval of the superintendent or the Board of Education, which is currently the case. So that whole series of checks and balances would all be delegated to the school hierarchy as opposed to this table, if that went through. Senator Ruiz has been gathering the input of many education stakeholders. As you can imagine, there are many different views out there on these various issues, and it is thought that the bill will be amended before it is voted on. There are other tenure reform bills also out there, but it is thought that the Ruiz bill will be the one that is ultimately voted on. And the last piece of legislation is the Opportunity Scholarship Act, which is sponsored by Senator Keene and Senator Lesniak. This bill would grant corporations tax credits for contributing to a program that issues education vouchers to certain students for use at any public or non-public school of their choice. So it is the position of the New Jersey School Boards Association that they would oppose any government policy that would divert funds from the state's revenue stream to private schools when sufficient revenue is not available for New Jersey's public schools. The New Jersey School Boards folks feel that this bill is now being revised And so we're not sure exactly what form it's going to take when it is voted on in the spring. And the last thing that we heard that is worth noting at the Garden State meeting is that there is speculation that school districts will receive more state aid than last year. As long as the economy holds, Lynn Strickland said that she is hearing in Trenton that the administration wants to continue to restore the funding that we lost 2 years ago. Her best bet was that we would receive 1% more in funding than we received last year. And Governor Christie will be making the State of the State address on January 10, and Lynn felt that there would be more information regarding our funding that would come out in that address, in that speech. So there's a lot going on. It's going to be an interesting spring, and we'll keep everyone informed. Yes, Jim?
And just to note one update on the school board election conversation.
Yes.
If you remember, I think New Jersey school boards and Lynn Strickland, specifically Garden State Coalition, mentioned that they were both opposed to having the municipality have a capability of passing a resolution that would change the timing of the school board elections, independent of any input from the school board or the public schools itself. So that might be an opportunity that we want to respond to regarding our position. I don't think it would be appropriate for the election of our membership to be dictated independently from this body.
I agree, but they are saying that it's going to be voted on probably on the 5th, January 5th. So if we want to make any comment, we must move very quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I would suggest that we do so. Anybody have any opinions?
What would we do?
We could propose a resolution. We could develop a resolution and submit it, enter it into our minutes, and send it to the legislation.
Asking that the legislation be amended to exclude the town from the purview of...
Actually, I think we're going to have to write a letter because our next meeting is on January 10th. I mean, unless you want to write a resolution right on the spot here. Because our meeting's on the 10th, their meeting's on the 5th. But we could write a letter to Senator Sweeney.
No, I would suggest that we do that.
Maybe
if everyone's in agreement.
Maybe hand deliver it to Senator Kane
Right.
and ask that he represent us and deliver it to Senator Sweeney specifically. He's been very open and willing to help.
Right. Okay, is everyone in favor of doing that? We could draft something.
Sure.
I'm in favor.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Good, thank you. Unfinished business. Roseanne.
I think the public might be wondering what the Uniform State Memorandum of Agreement between education and law enforcement officials is that we voted on, so I'm thinking that maybe I should tell them. Is that okay?
Please.
Sounds good.
Okay. Public school districts in New Jersey have been required to enter into annual agreements with law enforcement for over 20 years. In Union County, each fall, the county prosecutor and the county superintendent convene a meeting for all police chiefs and superintendents. Recent topics and legislation are reviewed, and then we have the opportunity to sign the state's Uniform State Memorandum of Agreement between education and law enforcement. So that is what we approved today, that the school board approved that we will in fact sign that document.
And the document is truthfully a very handy document because laws change every year and code changes every year, and it really is important that both the schools know what their responsibilities are and law enforcement does. And this puts it all into one document that is uniform throughout the state, and the training we also receive regarding it is also helpful as well. So it's a very useful document.
Thank you. Mark?
I guess this would be under old business. Could you, Rich, maybe give us an update on what you might know about the parking situation and some of the discussion. I've had some more people ask me about it. I think there was some things circulated to the board about it. And I also know, as a matter of fact, Dr. Renwick made some announcements in the school today, in the high school, reminding the high school students about the parking situation and how they should be behaving, so to speak, with driving and parking. Do you know anything?
I believe that a board representative has to be named. That's one of the other things that has to be named, because Julie had been the representative working with the town's efforts working on parking. So, and I believe we were told that they plan to have a meeting in January, so we'll need a board representative by then to be able to meet.
Right, that's my understanding as well. So we should know more in early January. Thank you. Anything else? All right. New business. Ad hoc committee reports.
Just give an update that the Technology Committee will be meeting tomorrow morning, as well as we met last week, and continuing our strategic talks towards providing wireless for the district. We should be getting some more information from our technology coordinator, Mr. Walker, and discussions with Mr. Panero. So we're hard at work, and we hope to have a good meeting tomorrow and possibly one more before the end of the year, and be able to report back in January some specific information.
Good. Anyone else? All right, liaison reports. Okay.
I wrote it down this week.
All right.
The Balance Committee met last Thursday. We continued our discussion about the direction of the committee and how best to organize our thinking and work. The committee's goal is to have a proposal for the board recommending various curricular, policy, and/or program interventions by the spring that would support student wellness. Our next meeting is January 12th.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jenny?
I attended the Union County Ed Services Commission meeting on December 7th. Nothing specific to report.
All right. Anyone else? Very good. We will recognize the public for questions and/or comments at this time. All right, seeing no one at the podium, I'd ask that the board approve the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purposes of discussing personnel, litigation, or negotiations, and be it further resolved that any discussion held by the board, which need not remain confidential, and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. Second?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thanks, everyone.